911.
Hey! Uh, please get someone to my house. It's 4700 Shrug, please.
What's going on?
Please, my girlfriend, I think she just shot herself in blood everywhere, please.
She what?
She shot herself, please.
Okay,
please get someone here, please.
Ma'am, I need you to calm down.
Sir,
ma'am, listen to me.
Sir, listen, hang on. Let me tell you the truth. I'm Deputy Banks with the St. Charles County Sheriff's Office. I work with y'all.
Michelle O'Connell was changing things up in her life. She had a 4-year-old daughter that she lived for, absolutely adored. She just got her dream job. She was ecstatic about it. And she was leaving a boyfriend that just didn't seem to fit. So why would she take her own life? I want to go over this case. I've been drawn to the unsolved mystery cases for a long time now, and I want to fit them into my channel because I think they're extremely important. I am a part of a Facebook group in the true crime community, and I asked a question on what are some unsolved cases that you wish got more attention? And I have over 800 answers, and it just really makes me incredibly sad and in awe, really, of the true crime community that some of these people, most of these people, they didn't even know, but their cases stick with them. They say they think about them all the time and they wish that their cases got more coverage. It's incredibly sad, and I would like to cover as many of those cases as I possibly can. So this is one of those cases. Today's case is going to go over the details of the death of Michelle O'Connell, and you'll find that her family believes that justice has not been served. So let's dive right into the mysterious case that I have for you today. If you haven't already, go ahead and grab your cup of coffee because it's time for your true crime coffee break here on Crime Cafe with Krysten Quinn. Michelle was born on October 6, 1985, and was the youngest of 5 older siblings who were raised by their single mother. They lived in a small St. Augustine, Florida apartment, and when Michelle was 20, she became pregnant with her daughter, Alexis. Her baby girl was absolutely everything to her. She made every single decision for her and because of her. Michelle had to actually work multiple jobs at one point to help provide for herself and her daughter, and she did what she needed to do until she got her dream job. Michelle got hired at a daycare and she was ecstatic about it. It came with medical benefits, and she was able to take her daughter, who was 4 at the time, take her with her to daycare. So, usually they receive a discounted price or something like that. I'm not sure what she was receiving, but she was able to take her daughter to work with her, provide for her family, and have coverage for her kid while she worked. And that is just everything that you need. She was so happy about this job that she even told her boss that she was going to make a doctor's appointment, even though she didn't feel sick. She was just going to do it because she was able to. That's how excited she was. Michelle's brother Scott was a St. John's deputy, and he introduced Michelle to Jeremy Banks, who was a St. John's County Sheriff's officer, and they completely hit it off. Michelle, she was 24 at the time, and they hit it off pretty quickly, and she moved into his house pretty fast. So it was actually only within a year's time of dating that she realized the relationship really wasn't good. They fought all the time. Jeremy had even been quoted saying, quote, "We don't get along, we fight all the time. I mean, it's never bad fighting, it's always just arguing." Michelle's sister, on the other hand, had later came out saying that Michelle actually hinted towards Jeremy being physically and verbally abusive towards her, but she was just too afraid to mention it to anybody or go to the police station or anything like that because she didn't want to, 1, get him in trouble with his job too much, and 2, her brother and her mom also worked at the sheriff's department at that time too. So she just really didn't want to take any actions against him, but her sister said that there was mention of abuse going on. On September 2nd, 2010, Michelle had lunch with her sister Chrissy, and during that lunch, Michelle told Chrissy that she was planning on breaking it off with Jeremy that night, but she was really scared because she didn't know how he was going to respond. And she was talking to her sister about how they had Paramore tickets. So they were going to be going to this concert. Alcohol was going to be involved, and usually Jeremy would want to go out afterwards and go to a bar and stuff like that. And Michelle wasn't going to want to. So she was telling Chrissy that she was nervous on how he was going to act with that. He would probably lash out. Chrissy urged her sister not to go to the concert. She was telling her, like, why don't you just not go? But Chrissy says, in true Michelle fashion, she said, I bought the tickets. I'm going to go to the concert. I'm going to break up with him, and I'll be all right. So, despite her sister's pleas, Michelle did go to the concert with Jeremy, and they fought before, during, and after that Paramore concert. Now, it was during the concert. It's said that it's during the concert that Michelle sent some texts to her sister Chrissy, who was babysitting her daughter at the time. So from Michelle, it says, quote, promise me one thing, Lexi will be happy and always have a good life. And Chrissy says, promise you what? And Michelle says that no matter what, Lexi will always be safe and loved. And Chrissy says, what's going on? I'm scared. And Michelle says, I'll be there soon. But Michelle wasn't there soon. Michelle never ever picked up her daughter. It was on the ride home from the concert that Michelle decided to tell Jeremy that she was leaving him. So when they got back to the house, she was packing up her and her daughter's things. And around 11:20 p.m., Jeremy makes a frantic phone call to 911.
911.
Hey, please get someone to my house. It's 4700 Sherlock Place.
What's going on?
Please, my girlfriend, I think she just shot herself in blood everywhere, please.
She what?
She shot herself, please.
Okay,
please get someone here, please.
Ma'am, I need you to calm down.
It's sir.
Ma'am, listen to me.
It's sir. Listen, hang on. Let me tell you the truth. I'm Deputy Banks with the St. Charles County Sheriff's Office. I work with y'all. Get someone here now.
Okay, I need you to calm down then. You know how it goes. What's the address?
4700 Sherlock Place.
Okay, what's going on there?
My girlfriend just shot herself with my CC weapon. Please get someone here now. Please.
Sir, we're doing that while I'm talking to you. Is she still breathing?
No, there's blood coming out of everywhere. Please.
Okay, so she's not breathing.
Call dispatch on TAC 2. Get them here now.
Sir, they are on the phone. I need you to calm down.
Jeremy, we're coming as fast as we can, okay? Calm down for me, okay?
You don't understand.
We're coming as quick as we can.
Please get someone here.
Jeremy.
When police got to Jeremy's house, they found him crouched at the bathroom door. He was holding his cell phone and he was pretty intoxicated. Now, remember, the police responding are his colleagues. They all work together, so they know him. And they found 24-year-old Michelle laying on her back on the floor with a gunshot wound to her head and tons of prescription pills in her pockets. Michelle was pronounced dead around 11:48 p.m. Now, immediately, the deputies and detectives started to gather outside the home to talk about what had happened, and they started to conclude pretty fast that Michelle took her own life. Later interviewed, one of the county's detectives, Jessica Hines, said, I didn't have any suspicions that it was anything other than suicide. I think that's what we were all kind of discussing, but just making sure that we covered our bases. Another statement from St. Johns County Corporal Mark Shand, quote, it appeared she had committed suicide. So when Jeremy Banks was interviewed, Jeremy said that on their way home, Michelle said to him, I'll have my things out by this weekend. And I said, are we breaking up? And she said, yes. And I was like, all right. I raised my voice. She raised her voice. We argued. But when we got to the house, we were fine. He states that he was in his garage sitting on his motorcycle when he heard a pop. He immediately knew what that pop was because he knows the sound. He got off the motorcycle, screamed her name, and then, charged towards the house, heard a second pop, and that's when he grabbed his phone and kicked down the bedroom door because it was locked. That's when he found Michelle laying on the carpet, and his service weapon was by her side. It was only a few hours later that Michelle's family was being notified that Michelle took her own life. The police at the scene took barely any time to come to that conclusion. It was very quickly and pretty much took everything that Jeremy said for his word. That's it. That's what it was. And 2 days later, a medical examiner confirmed that that's exactly what happened. But Michelle's family strongly believed otherwise. They knew that Michelle would never have taken her own life. She just got her dream job. She actually had it marked on her calendar that she had a class for CPR within a couple days. And I'm assuming that was probably for the daycare that she was going to work at. She had it on the calendar that was scheduled to go, and she was actually going to meet up with a friend that next day after the concert. She had it marked in her calendar that she was going to meet up with her friend. But the biggest thing of all is that they knew that she would never leave her daughter. She wouldn't. So when all the details of Michelle's death came out, it became even more clear for Michelle's family that she did not do this to herself. A former St. Johns County Sheriff's deputy, Deborah Maynard, was one of the first people to arrive on scene, and when she was interviewed, she said, quote, "Immediately it was almost like they were taking Jeremy's word that she shot herself at that point. We were told it was a suicide. They automatically said it was a suicide, though we are trained to every scene is a homicide until proven otherwise. But they did immediately start calling it a suicide." End quote. Even some people in the department later admitted to having doubts. Sergeant Scott Beaver said, quote, "When I first walked into that room, the first thought that went through my mind was, this is not good for Jeremy. I was in the homicide unit for a few years and it didn't add up, but I didn't do any more investigation into this." End quote. Now, crime scene photos showed Jeremy's gun near Michelle's left hand. She was right-handed. And a second bullet was lodged into the carpet right next to her body. Another thing that was mentioned is that the gun's retention holster would be very hard for someone who doesn't handle the gun regularly who isn't trained with that gun. So Michelle didn't know anything about that stuff, so it wouldn't have been very easy for her to even get it out of the holster. And it even had the tactical searchlight on, so that would be turned on for someone who needed, help with aim. It would make sure that you're aiming correctly and help you shoot your target. Michelle wouldn't have turned that on if she was going to shoot herself. I mean, it could have been turned on by accident. That could have happened, but I don't know. Michelle also had an unexplained cut above her right eye, and she had 2 empty prescription pill bottles in her purse. Remember that there were pills, they found pills in her pockets. There were no pills in her system, though. Jeremy had a second interview 12 days after the shooting, so he admitted to reading the department's confidential investigative report on the shooting, which he's not allowed to read that. It's his case. It's what happened at his house to his girlfriend with his service gun. But he admitted that he went in there and read confidential files on that. And there were no repercussions at all. Nothing was done about that. Michelle's friend says that he was not once treated like a suspect. He was treated like a brother. She said that's the best way to explain it, was that he was just treated like a brother the entire time. In January of 2011, Michelle's family got their first win. And because of their determination for Michelle, the sheriff, David Shore, asked for an independent state inquiry by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The investigation was led by Rusty Rogers, a former investigator of the year, who very, very quickly found that the initial investigation was grossly mishandled right from the start. So the initial investigators collected Jeremy's gun, they collected his clothes, and other evidence, of course, but they never had anything forensically tested. Nothing. So they got all this evidence, didn't have anything tested, nothing for DNA, nothing for fingerprints. Jeremy had 3 little blood dots on the inside of his shirt that was never tested, never questioned, nothing. They failed to gather any of Jeremy's cell phone data. They failed to isolate Jeremy. I mean, he was at a crime scene. So they actually took him for an interview, talked to him for a little bit, and let him go. They didn't take any pictures of him and his clothes, his hands, nothing. Nothing. Now, during Roger's investigation, he interviewed 2 of their neighbors, and both of those neighbors said that they actually heard arguing in Jeremy's apartment that night. And each of them even said that they heard a female yell, "Help." Then they heard a gunshot, and then they heard "help" again, and then another gunshot. Both of these witnesses took polygraph tests, and they both passed. Rogers also did an interview with Michelle's little girl and asked her about Jeremy, and she said that Jeremy's a bad man and that she actually saw him hit her mom with a belt before. Because of the neighbor's statements, the original medical examiner changed his findings privately from suicide to homicide. He never made it official. So he disclosed it to the state attorney that is going to be changing this, but then the state attorney actually told him to hold off on it while the investigation is underway. So nothing was ever changed. So during this time, Rogers did multiple interviews, sent evidence for forensic testing that should have been done in the first place, and he hired a crime scene reconstructionist expert as part of his investigation as well. So finally, in February of 2011, the results came back from the forensic testing. So they found absolutely no blood on Jeremy's gun. None. Okay. They found Michelle's fingerprints on his gun, but they didn't find Jeremy's fingerprints on that gun. He had just used it. He had a shift prior to the concert and everything. Like he just had it. But there were zero fingerprints from Jeremy on his own service weapon. And of course, Jeremy denied cleaning the gun prior to investigators getting there and everything like that. I mean, of course, why would he admit to doing that? He also denied washing his hands before they arrived, but his hands were like extremely clean, especially for someone who is like at a crime scene even. So like I said, Michelle's DNA was found on Jeremy's gun, but they weren't found, no fingerprints, none of Michelle's DNA was found on the two empty pill bottles that were found in her purse. And the tiny spots that were on Jeremy's shirt, the inside of Jeremy's shirt, that was Michelle's blood. And he just said he doesn't know how they got there. And the crime scene reconstructionist also reported some interesting discoveries. So it was concluded that the shooter had to have been left-handed. Michelle was not left-handed, she was right-handed. Jeremy, on the other hand, literally, was left-handed. And, you know, this could be the reason why the gun was placed by her left hand. Because when you have an adrenaline flowing, when something like that just happened, and you normally use your left hand, that is natural for you. So it's just, after taking everything into account, the reconstructionist found the circumstances were consistent with the homicide. Now, Dr. Hobbin, like I said, never filed Michelle's amended death certificate. He never changed anything. So when a new chief medical examiner was appointed, the new medical examiner upheld the original cause of death. He would not change it. So when a special prosecutor gathered Michelle's family in March of 2012 to announce that Michelle's cause of death will remain as suicide, her brother Scott completely went off. He freaked out. He freaked out so bad that he actually lost his sheriff deputy job. That's how bad he completely lost it. And Sheriff Shore compiled a 152-page assessment of his agency's and Rogers' investigation. Now, 2 pages of the report were naming the mistakes that his agency had made, and the rest of it you can find him either praising his agency's investigation or criticizing Rogers. And Jeremy Banks filed a civil lawsuit alleging that Rogers had violated his civil rights by detaining him as part of the investigation. Of course, a judge later dismissed this suit in 2018, finding that Rogers had probable cause to detain Jeremy for homicide. Now, in April of 2013, Shore rehired Michelle's brother Scott, and Scott ended up making up with Jeremy, as far as I've read, and is now accusing the state agency of manipulating his family into thinking his sister was murdered. This stance completely ostracized him from his family, of course. In 2016, Michelle's body was exhumed and inspected by a forensic pathologist who found that her jaw was actually in 2 pieces, and this would have indicated a fracture. And this was something that was completely left out of Michelle's autopsy report. And despite this, Michelle's death is still considered a suicide. But her family is completely 100% believes that Jeremy Banks killed Michelle. Now, I want to talk about something interesting that I read as a little like plot twist. In 2019, a 38-year-old amateur sleuth named Ellie Washtok, and sometimes went as Eli, was independently investigating Michelle's case and had said that they told Michelle's mother. Michelle's mother said, quote, "He was finished with his work. He was confident we would prove Michelle was murdered." And boom, Eli is found dead in his apartment. The death was ruled a homicide, and it's still cold. Like, that was it. So that was pretty surprising to read that too. Jeremy Banks was never charged with anything. He remains a St. John County Sheriff's deputy, and Michelle's mother said, quote, "You can't grieve until you get justice. You have to have your justice, and it never goes away." So, what do you think? One thing I really want to know, I really want to know the time that those text messages to her sister were sent. I want to know when they were sent, and I'm not sure if like during that, like, can you see if her phone pinged off anywhere during that time, like to send those messages? Like, where did it ping from? Because I want to know if she was actually still at the concert, if they were at home, Jeremy's home. I'd really like to know that. I'd like to know if where that was sent. That's one thing that really stuck out to me, is like, when were those text messages sent? Were they at the concert the whole time? How long did they stay? When did they go back to his house? Around what time did she die? You know, like, I know they called her death at around 11:48, but like, when did she die? Compared to like the phone call, you know, did it just happen? Like, there's so many things that I really want to like deep dive into this and know more about, because I just feel like it's all like combed over, like, so, you know, skated on by, like, and I feel terrible for her and her family and her little girl. So please tell me what you think. I would like to know. What are your thoughts on this? But that's all I have for today's video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe to this channel, because it really helps me a lot. And until your next true crime coffee break, stay safe, and thank you so much for your time. Bye.